And welcome to the weekly meeting for the Rotary Club of Harleysville. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now the four-way test of all the things that we say and do. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? It will be beneficial to all concerned. And our reflection this morning will be from Marcia.
No, I know. I don't think yell out. All right, just have to start off with a little levity there. I have two inspirational quotes to read. The first being by Patricia S. Churchland, who is a narrow philosopher. Being engaged in some way for the good of the community, whatever that community, is a factor in a meaningful life. We long to belong, and belonging and caring anchors our sense of place in the universe. The second one is by Eric Campano, emergency medicine documents. Joy is human connection, the compassion put into every moment of humanitarian work. Joy is using your time to bring peace, relief, or optimism to others. Joy gives without the expectation or wish, a reciprocity or gratitude. Joy immediately loves the individual in need and exceeds any calculation of how much the giver can handle or who the giver can.
Thank you, Marcia. Dan's going to be away next week. Up for Dan if anyone wants to learn how to work the equipment. It's fairly straightforward. And on to our calendar. So this coming weekend is going to be a busy weekend for Rotary. We have there are two big events coming up. The first being the District Rotoplast event, which Randy had mentioned to us, which is happening in Bethlehem.
Yeah, it's the Pennsylvania Playhouse, yes.
Yeah, at the Pennsylvania Playhouse.
You can still get tickets. You just go on the Pennsylvania Playhouse site. They have you look for the different links upcoming. Special one there for the Rotoplast fundraiser.
Okay.
And on you can select your seats and everything right on there, and you can print your tickets right out. So
Excellent. Thank you. Now, and there is also the district polio event going on that same day. Now, as Randy had mentioned, for the Rotoplast event, I'll go right to the theater website. I believe there is information for both events on the district calendar as well.
yes.
For those who are new to Rotary and want to learn a little bit more as you're getting accustomed to Rotary, there's a Welcome to Rotary event on the 18th, which I think is next Monday or Tuesday. Tuesday. That is a virtual event, and it is from 12 to 1. So you can do, if you're at work, you can do it at your desk at work. And then our big event, a week and a half away, the Halloween Fun Fest. Now, we've had two great events this fall, the golf outing and the croquet tournament. So we want to finish the year strong, and all indications are that we are going to. Dean, do you have any updates that you want to present this morning?
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. We got a lot of sponsors this year. We need a couple slots filled yet on the games. One or two. I think we're pretty good on the rest. The Interact Club is going to bring 6 people for the parade, and they have almost every slot filled at the games. So we should be in good shape this year. Trying to think of what else. As long as the weather cooperates this year, I hope it doesn't rain. We got a lot of new sponsors. It'll be a great event. Just an update on me. I'm wearing this for pity today. I had gamma knife radiation yesterday down at Penn. It was about a 6-hour day down there. Hopefully one shot, they got the spot on my brain. I start immune therapy next Tuesday at Grandview for my liver. And so far, everything looks good. Thank everybody for helping out. Oh, we're gonna do a cleanup at our house on the 29th. We're looking at 10 o'clock in the morning. Got some stuff to do outside. Bring some shovels, bring some pruners. I'm looking at, I probably don't need more than six to 8 people. We don't need 20 people or 15 people. We'd be standing around looking at each other. My son and neighbors came over, put all our outdoor furniture away last Saturday, planted some flowers. So we're pretty good shape. So if you can come out about 6 people, that'd be great.
Thank you, Dean. Speaking of weather, this Saturday for those 2 events that are going on, it looks like the weekend is going to be pretty good, at least Saturday. So it's going to be a nice fall weekend. So yes, that was my next agenda item. Calling it Dean Day from about 10 to noon, you think? Yeah. And Dean said only about 6 people because he really doesn't want to have to buy that whole lot of beer. Anything else that anyone wants to mention that are for upcoming events?
Hey.
Probably start talking about November.
John,
Yes, Bill? Online? Yes.
I just want to introduce from Wittenberg, Germany, Mario Dietrich. He's a member of the Rotary Club in Wittenberg, Germany. He's with us today. They're going to be leaving for Washington. That's why we're zooming in. But so he's here for you to be a visitor.
Hey, hello guys.
Good morning.
Good morning. I give best greeting from our Rotary Club in Wittenberg, and we'll only give you a short telling about our. This is our living Atlantic bridge, who is working so good, and we like it so much being together with Jean and Steve, good mayors. And we have a strong relationship between Wittenberg and HARLEYSVILLE. So I'll give you one example. Is 2 weeks ago, I met Vince from, I forgot his last name.
Vince Ryan, the organist at Advent.
Vince Ryan, who plays organ at Wittenberg Market Square. It was wonderful. So I went to him and said, hi, Vince, it's Mario. I'm a Mario. And we talking short together, and then we figure out that we will meet next week in HARLEYSVILLE, Pennsylvania. So that's what I only want to talk to you as a living Atlantic bridge between the US and Germany. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you. Carol?
Art of Health is having their 2nd annual 5K on November 5th. It's a run walk, so if anybody would like to participate, you can go up on our website and sign up for our website.
Where's that going to be, Carol?
Community, same place the Halloween thing is. We start and end at the community center.
Do you need volunteers for that as well?
I will have to check with the person in charge of that.
Okay.
Probably. I have nothing to do with the podcast.
Okay. Any questions about any of the events that we went over this morning? Okay, well, we have a great speaker this morning. Carol Ferguson is going to join us. And Mark, do you want to do an introduction?
Actually, I don't have information in front. I am in Boston from a hotel room here. Other than, I guess, Carol had spoken to us last year, has dealt with polio personally, is an expert on it, and with the polio emphasis, and then also some of the new information coming out about polio cases, it seemed very wise to get an expert and someone who could give us the latest. So I am very glad to have her joining us once more.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning, Carol.
Morning.
Good morning. I'm humbled by and intimidated by the word expert. I am a survivor and I'm the Polio Plus coordinator for our district. Are you ready for me to go?
Yes.
Okay. Can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. Here we go. I'm going to talk about the truth behind this terrible disease. And I'm also going to talk about the power of vaccines. And I just took a little sip of water here. We are survivors who bring forth information about managing the lifelong disabling effects of the polio virus. Our mission is very simple. We use the values of the 4-way test to help us serve all polio survivors and their caregivers. We are survivors of a vaccine-preventable disease. We take polio awareness very seriously. Our ongoing goal of awareness has a dual purpose. The first is to draw attention to the enormous number of polio survivors in the United States and abroad, the vast majority of whom are experiencing the disabling late effects of polio. The second, and of equal importance for us, is to draw attention to the importance of being immunized against polio and all crippling childhood diseases. Vaccination for smallpox is no longer necessary. It was eradicated in 1980 through the use of vaccines. Thanks to the passion and the raw determination of Rotarians and their partners in the GPEI, polio will be the second disease in history to have that marvelous distinction. This enormous effort is the basis for our dedication to support Polio Plus. Rotary and their partners in the GPEI, or the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, are tireless in their efforts to focus on disease prevention. The infrastructure that's being created as a result is unmatched in public health. We've seen their work right up close this year, right here in the United States. This is the first polio truth. It is an often deadly and permanently disabling virus that has no cure. Polio has not been eradicated. If that's the case, just how many polio survivors are there? There could be as many as 1 million of us here in North America. And the World Health Organization estimates that there are more than 15 million throughout the world. Just what exactly is polio? You're very capable of reading the CDC definition yourselves. We prefer to use another, less scientific term. Polio stinks. It's a lousy, lousy disease. You may have heard the term round and round and round she goes. Where she stops, nobody knows. That's true for all of us who had polio. Somehow, and most of us will never know, we ingested it. It traveled up into our bellies, up into our spinal cords. Just how far it went and the damage that it did can be vastly different for each of us. Let's talk a little bit about the history. This is what most of us think polio looks like. Here's a polio reality. For us, it's deeply personal, and understand that nothing could be further from the truth. Survivors of this disease all over the United States and abroad will always remember the terror, the sadness, and the loneliness that came with being so sick. We will always remember the lonely months and years of hospitalization, surgeries, and painful rehabilitation, all while being separated from our parents and siblings. We will always remember the frightening reality of an iron lung and the lack of human touch. We will always remember the sorrow that came with discovering wheelchairs, leg braces, and crutches were ours for life. We will always remember the loneliness that came as we returned home and were forced to accept that everyone around us knew it was the home of a cripple, and parents kept their children away. We will always remember the shock that has come with the reality of the late effects of polio, even those of us who thought we escaped or recovered from paralysis find ourselves with new weakness, fatigue, and pain as we age. It saddens us to know that more than 60 years later, after the Salk vaccine was approved, this is what polio looks like today. And polio looks like this. The last outbreak of wild polio in the United States was 1979. That means not all of the more than 500,000 polio survivors in the United States are on Medicare. In addition, legal immigration, adoption, and the very rare occurrences of vaccine-derived poliovirus has resulted in there being very young polio survivors living right here in the United States. What makes matters worse is that as a result of the long-haul effects of this terrible disease, polio attacks us not once, but twice. That's why it stinks. These long-haul effects, called post-polio syndrome, or PPS, happens to the vast majority of survivors, regardless of whether or not we had paralytic or non-paralytic polio. As you read the description of these symptoms, you're probably thinking that happens to lots of people with lots of things. You're right. That's why PPS is always a diagnosis of exclusion and can be very difficult to diagnose and treat. We're all the same in survival, yet we're all very different. The survivors on our working team are the clearest example of that. Born in Taiwan, May contracted polio before she turned 1. She was taken to a clinic where she had hot water poured on her legs as what was called heat therapy. She came to the US where she met and married a fellow survivor. Her falls began in her early 40s. Now both May and her husband have post-polio syndrome. They both struggle with muscle weakness and chronic pain. Neither one can climb stairs, yet their symptoms are similar, but different. May and her husband are living the reality that PPS can appear different in each of us. Joe was paralyzed from the waist down at age 5. He spent 2 years, yes, 2 years in the hospital. Joe doesn't know life without crutches and braces. He married, had a long career in the printing business, and now, forced to retire early, he is completely dependent upon double braces and crutches. He struggles to manage unbearable cold and chronic shoulder pain. Joe has no choice but to spend more and more time in his power chair. Deb was paralyzed in her right side at age 5. She spent 6 months in the hospital 100 miles from her home because the local hospital was full. The first 4 weeks, while still in quarantine, her parents drove 100 miles, stood in the parking lot, looked up at the window where their little girl waved with the only arms she had. They turned around and drove 100 miles back home, only to have to wait another week to see their daughter again. Deb is still completely paralyzed on her upper right side. She married, raised 4 children, and worked outside the home. Now, with post-polio syndrome, Deb has developed lower right side weakness. She struggles to manage chronic pain, requires the use of a brace, a cane, and now a power chair for any distance walking. Jim was completely paralyzed from the neck down at age 2. Imagine this, your 2-year-old waking up totally paralyzed from the neck down. His parents carried their baby boy to the hospital only to be told that the hospital was full and they needed to take him home. A quarantine sign was nailed to the door. All the children in the neighborhood knew that polio was in the house. Jim always had a walking limitation. No one in the neighborhood would befriend the cripple. He married, he had a wonderful career, and spent 50 years volunteering with the local fire department. Forced to retire early, Jim is completely wheelchair dependent. I had what was called typical flu-like symptoms at age 2. The doctor was never called. I recovered on my own within a week. As I grew, I developed a slight visible drop foot. My gradual muscle weakness, unusual fatigue, and frequent falls were highlighted by a significant reaction to anesthesia as a young adult. After a long journey, a neurological specialist found the damage that was proof of an old case of what was termed to be non-paralytic or inapparent polio. The late effects of a very mild case of this virus have put me in a leg brace. I require a cane for stability. I struggle to manage chronic pain, and I'm dependent upon a wheelchair for any distance walking. We understand that just like those who suffer today from having to hide their true selves, polio survivors were taught not to speak of it. It was over. It was done. All of this happened because the miracle of the newly developed Salk vaccine came too late for us. We often feel very much isolated and alone. Some polio scars are visible in the form of paralyzed limbs and wheelchairs. Other scars come in the form of fear and pain long buried inside as we went forward with our lives. We have to work hard to understand the complex issue of both the physical and the psychological symptoms of post-polio syndrome so that we can become independent once again. Here's another critical polio truth. We can't forget the survivors. Polio survivors all over the US and abroad are told by healthcare professionals, PPS? What's that? I've never heard of it. Polio was over and done long ago. Your symptoms could never be related. Once zero happens, and there's not a doubt in our minds that someday polio will be eradicated because of post-polio syndrome, it will take a full generation for the disabling effects of the polio virus to be completely gone. What makes matters worse I apologize. These photos explain why. As young teenagers, these boys are forced to crawl on the ground. Post-polio syndrome for these 2 young men will be physically devastating. This photo breaks our hearts. Notice the boys on the left who are teasing and making fun of him. He is lonely, afraid, and isolated, all because of the effects of a vaccine-preventable disease. Post-polio syndrome will be a heartbreaking reminder of these painful memories. Let's talk about the vaccines. The IPV, the The inactivated polio vaccine is often known as the Salk vaccine. It is the only vaccine to be given in the United States since 2000. The OPV, the oral polio vaccine, is often known as the Sabin vaccine. It is the most effective means of delivering the vaccine in underdeveloped countries, as those precious life-saving drops can be transported to rural, hard-to-reach areas and safely delivered by non-healthcare professionals. So if wild polio was eradicated in the United States in 1979, why are we still giving children the vaccine? Americans often say, what's the big deal? Why do we need to vaccinate our children for diseases we haven't seen in years? Most are shocked when they hear that wild polio has not been eradicated. But a genetically linked strain of vaccine-derived polio in Israel, the UK, and the United States? How can that be? This is why. Polio is only one of the many diseases that are only a plane ride away, and once here, can circulate in under-vaccinated communities. All children and adults that can be, must be vaccinated. COVID-19 has created challenges all over the US and abroad. Even so, the work has not stopped. Thanks to the Plus and Polio Plus and the infrastructure that is now in place, the pauses in polio eradication campaigns that are critical in Afghanistan and Pakistan were only temporary. When there was a child to be vaccinated, they remained compliant with COVID-19 safety measures to make sure the dual message of the necessary fight against both polio and COVID-19 reaches home. Even with COVID and the Taliban takeover in Afghanistan, through these heroic measures, more than 300 million children were vaccinated in 2021. We will do everything in our power to continue this critical work. "2022 has certainly been off to a rough start for global polio eradication. It began with the unthinkable. Africa has seen type 1 wild polio virus. The Ukraine has seen paralysis due to circulating vaccine-derived polio prior to and since the Russian takeover. Genetically linked circulating vaccine-derived polio virus has been confirmed in Israel, the United Kingdom, and the United States. But here in the US as well, the CDC, one of Rotary's partners in the GPEI, has the most sophisticated polio lab in the world. It was called upon to identify the genetic components of poliovirus found in the sewage in New York, the UK, and Israel. These components have been identified as being genetically linked. The GPEI is doing everything they can to answer this call. No one is giving up. A case of polio anywhere is a threat to children everywhere. Even though this worldwide crisis, and with COVID-19 and polio rearing its ugly head in the UK and the US, the message has remained very clear. Polio survivors can easily connect the fear of contracting polio to the fear we've been experiencing all over the world with COVID-19. Our fears are reality-based and pray that the miracle of modern vaccines is keeping the worst of this virus from harming our families and friends. I'm very honest about this being hard for me to do live, so I'm just going to give you that. The memories of fear and isolation that have reemerged is troubling at best to the permanently disabled polio survivors all over the world. Our compassion for those experiencing the long-term or long-haul effects of COVID-19 is real, and that compassion comes from our hearts. We love the opportunity to enjoy life once again, Even while in the grip of this new virus, we've been engaged in our commitment to encourage parents to vaccinate their children for the many childhood diseases that are threatening to return. Our message is about the truth.
We're survivors. We just want to help parents understand the pain and disability can last a lifetime.
As Rotarians, working diligently since 1985 to eradicate polio, we've seen firsthand the beauty of vaccines. Now Rotary is asking us to work together to join the effort in our own communities and become a part of the solution as we celebrate science. Global vaccination is the path to ending the pandemic. Vaccines are safe, effective, and save millions of lives each year. The eradication of polio remains the goal of the highest order for Rotary. We can continue to apply the lessons we've learned in fighting polio to the COVID-19 response efforts at home.
Just like the GPEI, we're asking you to build bridges with parents in your communities. While I love data, and I could talk about it all day, we've learned that bombarding hesitant parents with studies and numbers has limited success and can sometimes even backfire. We need to find the right forms of persuasion so that we can help people make better choices and protect me from you.
We asked polio survivors to join us in celebrating our gratitude for Rotary International's determined effort to eradicate this terrible disease. The response was global. These words are meant for all Rotarians. These words are meant for you. The moving words at the bottom of this page, they came from more survivors all over the world than we can even begin to count. Join us as we respond to this call to action. Let's keep up this amazing work and get this job done. Vaccines work. Let's all support Saturday's event. Now I hope there's lots of questions. Mark, thank you.
Does anyone have any questions? Anyone online?
You're welcome to ask about New York and why that's happening.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I wanted to do. You shared it's a virus. I mean, antivirus based one, is it? Or all right, what is causing it? How likely or concerned are people about spread from there? Why just New York City and not any further than that? And what's our best way of attacking that?
Okay, it's 5 counties in New York. They have found polio in the wastewater. The way this happened is circulating vaccine-derived polio, the current oral polio vaccine. No, that's not correct. It's been replaced by a novel oral polio vaccine type 2. But the oral polio vaccine that was given for years, the children can shed the virus for 3 to 4 weeks after having the vaccine. Okay, so they can shed the virus. Where the county, where it is a vaccinated community, it's not a threat because all the children have been vaccinated. In an under-vaccinated community, like Rockland County, New York, it is a serious threat. Somehow, and the CDC has not announced how it happened, this strain has been genetically linked to a strain from Pakistan. The man that was paralyzed came in contact somehow with the shedding of the virus through as a result of the vaccine. Okay. And because he was not vaccinated, he got polio. Now we celebrate the head of the Department of Health for the state of New York, because what she talked about, finally, we were so grateful to hear it. For one case of paralytic polio, there are hundreds or even thousands of potential non-paralytic or inapparent cases of polio. And you're speaking to someone this morning that is living with the lifelong effects of an inapparent case of polio. This is what's so frightening about it. Here in the United States, since 2000, only the injectable vaccine has been given. That vaccine will protect for all 3 types of polio, 1, 2, and 3. Parents in the United States, or those of us who are adults in the United States, have absolutely nothing to fear if we were vaccinated. Nothing whatsoever. This is happening in under-vaccinated communities and where it spreads. The fear is how big this is. Lots of cities in the US are now testing wastewater. The state of New York has done an amazing job having vaccination campaigns. You'll enjoy this story. We were privileged to be asked by a media company in New York to assist with a vaccine message for the under-vaccinated communities, the English, Hispanic, and of all things, Creole. And we found survivors that were born in New York, and we found survivors fluent in Spanish. Creole was a little bit difficult, so we went to Rotary. And Rotary found a physician who speaks Creole so that the message could be trusted. And those vaccine messages have been published in the 5 counties in New York. It's a real problem, and they're doing the very best they can to communicate that this is a terrible, terrible virus, and please vaccinate your children. The solution is so simple.
Another question. You talk about being able to shed for a couple of weeks. You talked about an updated antivirus medication. Does that still have that possibility of shedding, or is there something that doesn't allow that now?
Okay, the original oral polio vaccine, unfortunately, there's a teeny tidbit. I'm not a virologist, a bit that we can't even imagine. So tiny. A little bit of live virus was capable of mutating, and that's what happened. So the World Health Organization, in the middle of COVID, announced an emergency use for the new oral polio vaccine type 2. Over 350 million doses have been given, but due to lack of vaccination during COVID that hasn't been enough to change over from the one to the other. And so, unfortunately, that's what's happening. Now, the GPEI is doing everything they can with World Health and the Gates Foundation to switch over to that vaccine that is less likely to mutate. But in the meantime, this is what's happened. Statistically, 1 in every 2.3 million children can get polio as a result of the shedding of the vaccine and the virus mutating within it. The US, 1 in every 2.3 million was too much. That's why we transferred over to the injectable vaccine in 2000. Typically, but not always, those are children with an undiagnosed or unknown immune disorder of some kind. And it's unknown to the parents, and that's why it happens. But it does 1 in every 2.3 million when you're talking about the billions of children all over the world is too many. So transferring to this new vaccine has been an amazing event, even during COVID.
What's typically the age, like for a young child, a newborn or whatever, how long do you have to wait till they can get the vaccine?
Here in the US, we're given 4 doses, believe it or not, 4 doses of the vaccine. Most parents don't even realize their children are getting a booster. 2 months, 9 months, forgive me, it's like 15 to 18 months, and then around 4 to 5 years. My granddaughter just had her booster. But we are still giving 4 doses in the US. And what the recommendation is for adults that were never vaccinated, that were within reach of these counties of New York, maybe working there, a healthcare professional, to get, if you were never vaccinated, get the full series.
Any other questions?
Healthcare professionals in northern New Jersey, it has been recommended they get vaccinated.
For healthcare professionals?
Yes, in northern New Jersey. And I also read Connecticut as well.
Well, thank you, Carol. As Carol had talked about what's going on in New York, that really kind of highlights that the work that Rotary has done over the past number of years is not over yet. And same things like this can happen in some of these under-vaccinated communities. So we can't let our guard down.
You know, the call to action that Rotary International has given us regarding vaccines is pretty exciting. It allows us to it really asks us to bring the message home to our own communities. And we're working with the Pennsylvania Immunization Coalition quite closely to try and communicate that.
Thank you. Well, as you may have noticed, there's going to be no Rotary Trivia today because our Rotary Trivia officiants are not present. I received a package in the mail this week from Rotary, and I thought to myself, you know, I haven't ordered anything from Rotary. Why would I get a package? But it's not for me. So, Len, Ruth, can you come forward, please, since you are here today? Yeah, come on over here so you don't trip on any of the cords. I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but you are a recipient of the Paul Harris 4-stone pin for your contributions to the Paul Harris Foundation. Congratulations.
Imagine Bill Gates. Imagine Bill Gates.
Oh, okay.
It's perfect. It looks perfect.
Get your hand out of your pocket.
Thank you.
Pass it around.
Take it right in the chat.
You know, our club, as you know, is a very big supporter for the foundation, and I want to thank Len for his contributions, of course, and just as a great example for all the work that we do as a club for the foundation. Thank you, Len. Any brags or sags this week? John?
This past weekend, I got a chance to drive down to West Virginia. It had been a goal of mine to hike up to the top of Seneca Rocks. It's a big monolith of, I don't know if it's granite or whatever it is, but it sticks up above the trees. I've been down there a couple times birding, and I didn't get a chance to hike up to the top, so I went down there, and in my kilt, I hiked all the way to the top, and it was beautiful weather. I stayed at a campsite in a tent, and Sunday morning when I woke up, it was 31 degrees. There was frost on my car and on the grass. And I'm like, but the tent had a bed with a frame, had a little refrigerator, it had a heater, had a microwave. I guess they call it clamping or something like that. Yeah.
Clamping, yeah.
So it was warm enough. It wasn't warm, but it was warm enough. But I had a great weekend, and I got to meet a lot of neat people hiking up and down the mountain. Didn't see a whole lot of birds, but it was a fun hike.
Yes, Randy?
We had the opportunity to go down to Virginia and Harrisonburg this past weekend, and we spent the weekend watching our grandbaby. Because her parents had a wedding, so it was wonderful. You don't realize how much a 14-month-old, keeps you hopping anymore. But it was just a great opportunity. We don't get to see them that often, and she was just precious. And we had heavy frost on Sunday morning in Harrisonburg as well. So,
Yes, Lynn?
I've got two SAGs. The first one is, wow, we're talking about polio. We just lost one of our best friends. She had polio. I'm not sure what age it was, but they were our first neighbors in 1960 on Summit Street, Souderton. We've been visiting back and forth ever since. Now, her husband died about 15 years ago. And she's in Florida. Every time we go down there, every year we visit her. But anyway, she's 95. She was a polio survivor. She's a very good friend of ours. And the other SAG is that I'm not supposed to be here today. I'm supposed to be cruising on the Mississippi, but there wasn't enough water on the Mississippi. Can you believe that? For this coast.
Oh, because of the drought. Wow.
The freighters were even getting stuck. They were loading lighters so they could get up to the stream, or up the river. But anyway, so that's why
Oh, boy. Wow.
crazy Mississippi was.
Marty and I took a trip up to New England to visit friends in Situate, Massachusetts, which is outside of Boston. And then we went on to Vermont, and the weather in Situate was terrible. It was cold and windy and rainy and all that stuff. But once we got out of Boston area and went over through New Hampshire to Vermont, it was gorgeous. The leaves were just starting to change. A lot of leaf peepers, were out visiting. So we had a great trip, and weather was perfect over there.
Right.
Just brag, like to thank Sandy and Bud and Bud's friend Jack. We played golf yesterday at the down outing. We enjoyed the weather, and it was just a nice social event. We did not do super well, but we had a lot of fun. And the food was good. The food was good, and the beer was good. But it did. George Chambers, who was the one who brought up 4 cigars. He was kind of the MC and everything, and he was very grateful. I talked to him later. He was very grateful that he participated. So I thank Bud, his friend, and Sandy for helping us do that.
Excellent. Thank you.
Let me add to that. I didn't play golf. I swung the club, and once in a while it even hit the ball.
Anybody online? Okay. Any final comments before we conclude our meeting this morning? Yes, Randy.
Just want to thank those who contributed wine for the event for Saturday. I appreciate it, and hopefully we have a very nice event. I think as of yesterday, I think there was like 50 or 60 tickets sold. So we're hoping to have a good event on Saturday.
Excellent. Oh, we got to do the raffle. I'm sorry. Yep. Who wants to pick the ticket?
Let's see. Did you buy any of the? Jim? No, then you can draw. All right.
That's 4 digits. 7486. 7486. Alex.
28, I counted this morning, there's 28 white ones left, and then the green, and it's in there.
Oh.
So the drama continues. Okay, so
First time we did it.
make sure that when you leave today, go out and try to discover new things, like maybe new Rotarians, kind of like what Christopher Columbus did on this day in 1492 when he first set eyes on the Bahamian Islands. Although he did think he had reached East Asia at that point, he did eventually figure out he was in the Bahamas. And what we're going to do when we leave today, we're going to simply talk about Rotary today. Everyone have a great week. We're going to have our board meeting right after, and enjoy the great weather.
Your badges, please. I really ought to get like an email updating me.